Jai Hind children. I hope you all are doing fine. So this is the second module of the chapter Our Changing Earth. In the first module, we had discussed about endogenic forces, and we had also discussed about volcano and tsunami. The third feature which is formed because of it is mountain ranges and trenches. As we know, because of the slow movement of the lithospheric plate, it causes changes on the Earth's surface, and because the plates collide, they create mountain systems like the Himalayas. This is a picture how the mountain ranges are formed. If we summarize endogenic force, it occurs beneath the surface of the Earth, and it causes physical change in the Earth's surface like earthquake, volcanoes, and so on. So the next factor we are dealing is exogenic force, and the name itself is telling that it refers to the external phenomena that occurs on or above the Earth's surface. And the main elements of exogenic forces are air and water. We know that the landscape is always continuously worn out by two factors. First is weathering and by erosion. Weathering is the breaking up of the rocks on the Earth's surface, and erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like wind, water, and so on. So we'll be dealing with the work of first water like river. The running water in the river, it erodes the landscape, and when the river tumbles down at steep angle over very hard rocks or down a steep valley, it causes waterfall. It is the picture is there given in your book also. The second feature which is formed is by the river is meander. Now we have to understand what is a meander. As the river enters the plain, it twists and turns like a snake, as you can see in the picture, and it forms large bends on the sides, which is known as a meander. So as the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, and it forms large bends, which are called as meander. This is the picture. Next, the next formation is an oxbow lake. Now, what is an oxbow lake? Because of the continuous erosion and depletion along the sides of the meander, the ends of the meander become closer and closer. After some time, what happens? The meander loop cuts off from the river, and they form a cut-off lake. If you can see the picture, that the first picture is you can see the meander. The second picture, it started to cut off, and in the third picture, a oxbow lake is being formed. Once again, I'm telling, because of the erosion and the depletion along the sides of the meander, the ends of the meander loop, they come closer and closer. After some time, what happens? They cut off from the main river and they form a cut-off lake, which is called as the Oxbow Lake. And this is the picture. The third is a floodplain. Now, what is a floodplain? As it floods, it deposits layers of fine soil and other material like sediments along the banks. Now, this leads to the formation of a floodplain, which is good. Uh, you can say an area which is rich in nutrients, and that supports plant growth. The next feature which is formed is a leaves. Now, what is a leaves? The raised banks which are formed are called as the leaves. Now, as the river approaches the, this is the picture of the leaves. You can understand by it that after a lot of deposition, it creates structures like this, which are called as leaves. The next feature, what is a delta? Now, as the river approaches the sea, the speed of the flowing water starts to decrease, and the river begins to break up into a number of streams, which is called as a distributary. Once again, I'm telling, as the river flows slowly, what happens? The flowing water, the speed decreases, and over a time period, what happens? The river breaks into into a number of streams, which is called as a distributary. Now, the next feature which is formed is a delta. What is a delta? The river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load, and each distributary forms on the mouth of the river. The collection of these sediments on the mouth is called as a delta. This is a picture of the Bay of Bengal Delta. Next, we will be dealing with the work of the sea waves. Now, the erosion and and depletion of the sea waves, they also cause a number of coastal landforms. If you see the pictures, you will be getting a clear idea how the first picture, how it has got eroded. Next, after a few years, it becomes the second one, and then after a few years, only the walls are remaining, and this is the third. We will be studying in detail. The first one. The first one is sea cave. We are here studying about the work of the sea waves. Now, what happens? Sea waves, they continuously strike on the rocks which are there on the sea. Slowly what happens? Cracks start to develop. Over a time, these cracks become larger and wider. The hollow like caves which are formed on these rocks are called as the sea cave. The first picture, as you can see, this is the sea cave. The next feature which is formed is the sea arc. Now what is a sea arc? We can see that the first picture is depicting that it is a cave-like structure. Slowly, as the cavities or the gap, they become bigger and bigger, only the roof of the caves remain. You can see the roof is remaining, and these features are called as the sea arc. You can see only the roof is remaining. The third thing, what is happening in the third picture? There is further erosion happening. Waves are still beating, and slowly after a time, erosion breaks the roof and the walls remain. So when the walls remain, these features are called as stacks. This is the third picture, which is called as a when the walls are only remaining, and this is called as the stack. Next is a sea cliff. The steep rocky coast which rises almost vertically above the sea water is a sea cliff. And the last feature is a sea beach. Sea beaches are like sea wave. They leave behind sediments in form of fine sand, and they are called as the sea beach. Next. The next feature is the work of ice. This is the picture of a glacier, how the ice also forms features. What happens? Glaciers are rivers of ice, you all know, and they erode the landscape by taking off the soil and stones to expose the solid rock below. Now, the glaciers carve out deep hollows, and as the ice melts, they get filled up with water, and beautiful lakes are formed in the mountains. The material which is carried by the glacier, such as rocks and whether they are big or small, sand, silt, they get deposited, and these deposits are called as glacial moraines. So what is a glacial moraine? As the ice melts, they fill up the hollows with water. The material which is carried by the glacier, such as rock or sediments, or sand, silt, they get deposited, and they form the thing which is formed is glacial moraines. You can see this is the glacial moraine. And the last is the work of the wind. Work of the wind means how the wind also affects a certain formation. Uh, as we all know that winds they blow from one region to another region, and they create different landforms. These are the pictures which are given. The first one is the mushroom rock. Now, what is a mushroom rock? A mushroom rock is what happens in the deserts. We can see rocks in the shape of a mushroom. Winds erode the lower section of the rocks, and the upper section remain. And these the structures which are formed are called as mushroom rocks. The second picture is telling you what happens. The rocks have a very narrow base and a wider top. The next one is sand dune. Sand dune, as we all know, when the wind blows, it lifts and transports sand from one place to another, and when it stops blowing, the sands fall at one particular place, and they cause a sand dune. And the third is loess. Now, when the grains of sand are very light and very fine, the winds carry it over a very long distance. And when such sand is deposited in a huge area or a large area, formation is a loess. So these are the features which are formed because of wind. We'll be discussing your doubts in the live class. Till then, Jai.